Okay, this lesson is how can our language, the Koine text particularly, help us when we try to respond to people who seem to, by implication, if not outright statement, make the assertion that why are we studying matters that have already been settled long ago. Now that was odd for me as a pastor in a New Covenant church, a covenant community, because we have outsiders encroach often. And then we have seekers, people who are literally interested in learning, and they're obviously, you can tell something's taking place inside of them that's certainly not correlated to their flesh, which would not, we never expect from the flesh an interest. So here we have to sort that out. But one of the tells is that people who discourage study, discourage learning, that was antithetical to any attitude of Christ, especially when their sentiment was, we already have all this worked out. Now, I'm not sure in what field of study that would be true. Example, in school, any public school here in the United States, for example, people start with the alphabet, the numbers, the letters, they work up to words, and then they learn grammar, the parts of speech, and then they learn about the relationship of the words, syntax, they learn about composition, context, things like that. So in math, they start with numbers, simple operators of multiplication, division, addition, things like that, and then work yourself from arithmetic to mathematics all the way through different kinds of calculus, differential equations, linear algebra, just on and on. But it's really striking that in politics and religion, in politics, no one's encouraging the study of political science, or who would want to be a politician, and certainly no one's encouraging in religion a study of the Bible, because then how do you differentiate yourself in a marketing strategy that would find people subject to your effort to proselyte them? Because if you don't have followers, you don't have money. If you don't have money, you really don't have any interest in what you're teaching. One man was supposedly a pastor, and now he's an atheist because he noticed people don't really study the Bible. And a LifeWay Research study came out saying that although Americans are fond of the Bible, few study it or read it for that matter. But that's just real normative out there. It's just odd in a church. And then it's odd for people to say, well, I have my New Hampshire Confession of 1833 called a Declaration of Faith among the American Baptist Associated Churches. Don't really need anything more than that. I've got my Baptist Way book. I've got my 52 doctrinal lessons, whatever, all that. And I have all that myself. And or maybe you have your books, Pillars of Orthodoxy. I still don't know the connection for why it would be encouraged to tamp down, or we'd be encouraged to tamp down our study. So, for example, this lesson, it's a good lesson. The word truth itself is in function unconcealment. And as we've talked before, we found a lot of pushback when people made a very definitive, very objective expression, regeneration precedes faith. Now, I don't know why that alarms anyone on either camp. So if people are overreacting because, oh no, they got the cart before the horse, so to speak, as they hear that a lot. When people have never evaluated, they just reject it in the name of some simple analogy. Or others say, no, it has to be this way. Regeneration precedes faith. God's sovereign. Well, I wouldn't hinge the sovereignty of God upon an assertion by men when we still haven't identified a text. We haven't made an effort. Now, some have. There's apologists out there who work in language. And the closest you'll come in an expression according to the text is by Dr. James White, Alpha and Omega Ministries. He's more of a theodicist, and he's aware of the fallible elements in Calvinism, but very few people would challenge him or do well to make an argument against his theodicy. But that's not what we're talking about. It's just there's an example of someone who took the phrase regeneration precedes faith and went to 1 John 5:1, and it's probably the best effort that can be made as far as if you want to build a case, that'd be your closest one, and yet the difference falls on a finite verb and a participle. So whatever the difference between a finite verb and a participle is, which you won't find unless you're in this class or unless you're studying Koine Greek, you won't find anyone really wanting to engage in a serious conversation. So I just wanted to introduce what it looks like if we examine the book. What would we learn about things that occur prior to regeneration? Well, first of all, I'll write this out. This is this is the preposition here, and this is a verb, and there's your primary active ending as listed in your lexicon. So that's just, and here you notice crypt, like a crypt, something concealed, something hidden in a crypt. This is where we get the word apocryphal is the noun, like an apocryphal book. So this is away from, and this is crypt, conceal, to conceal away, or to crypt. It's like a cryptic message. That's what we'd say. So I'll just write cryptic. So here it's to achieve the cryptic result of away. So you're moving it away from in a cryptic manner. And this is to remove away from, and this is kalypto. This is the idea of drawing back, to reveal, as we would call it. So you're unveiling, and this is where we get the word apocalypse. So here is an unveiling, a revealing. So you can see the difference. This is to remove what would otherwise achieve this cryptic state and condition. Now notice this correct opinion. This is eudokia. Dokia is from doxos, like in doxology. This is the word correct. Sorry. And this is the word opinion. There we go. This is referring to an infant, someone who's infantile. In the context I'm going to demonstrate, it refers to an unprimed, someone who hadn't been proselyted. And then here's Kyrios, Lord, controller. And then I'll go to the text and show you some things. Here's sophone, wise, or I'll say sophist in this text. There we go. And then this word is, there's your preposition, together with. Those of you that actually are studying, you know this anyway from synergy. When you hear the word synergy and let's say you're in a conference of teamwork and synergy, working together, there you go. They want to synergize the workforce. Well, it's together with, because the outcome when synergy is involved is greater than the sum of its parts. So here we have where their understanding is together with, so they have a mutual understanding. These are prudent ones. You know, I run into them all the time. They know how things work. They know how the game's played. They know the maneuvers to make. Now, you're clueless. You're just living your life as let's say, for example, a husband to your wife, a father to your children, a brother in a covenant. You're studying your Bible. You're worshiping God in spirit and in truth, in a sober, reverential worship, a covenant assembly, a covenant church, covenant community, a covenant body of Christ. And it doesn't occur to you to learn how to manipulate, learn how to undermine, to look at how I can take advantage of my neighbor, when one of the tenets of the faith is to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, body, and strength, and our neighbors ourselves, and then to do unto them as we'd have another do unto us. So we wouldn't even be entertaining the idea on ways of undercutting, undermining, stumble blocking, taking advantage of neighbors. So it's quite remarkable that this is what was taking place. And when Jesus made his statement, I'll move this out of the way. And this is why I said I don't necessarily have any ability to appreciate the sentiment that we've already settled all this, so let's just not study the Bible, but except that's the end in mind. That is an effort to take things away from people and to give it a cryptic attribute. To when it's over with, it's cryptic and it's away, it's out of reach. It's something sophists do, and it's people who consider themselves in a mutual understanding, a groupthink, if you will. And the text that this came from, or comes from, is Jesus. It says in that hour, Luke 10:21, in that hour Jesus rejoiced in spirit and said, I thank thee. And I'm reading from the King James. You can get this Bible app. I recommend it if you want to study. O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that thou hast hid, so God's hidden it, these things from the wise and the prudent, and you've revealed it, notice this, unto them, unto babes. Even so, Father, it seemed good, correct opinion, to reveal it to people like this. Now, notice this, God is taking away and concealing, hiding things that to this class of sophists that he's revealing to this class of those who are unprimed. You remember these were the people who proselyted, which has the idea of towards. They wanted people to approach toward them. People lament populist preachers today, and people who go out and take a stand against, let's say, some popular, iconic, commercialized pastor or something, and they're just thespians, professional actors, and they say, well, that guy's a heretic and he's leading people astray. But then that person may not be encouraging people to study and to know for themselves, and especially when we can know anything we want now. We have all the data. It's just God's still involved, and Jesus called him Lord, invocative, Lord of heaven and earth. And you can look that up. It appears in the text in this form. Let me see, like that. That's vocative, where he says, oh Lord, he's calling his Father. So we have God active in this. So those who have a high view of God's sovereignty already know this, don't question this. We don't see these people as victims. We don't see these people as deserving. So this is unmerited. This is unmerited. There's nothing here. It wouldn't be admirable to say, well, I'm just a simple-minded person and I don't want to know anything except what God reveals to me. That awareness and that assertion would have nothing to do with this text. These were the people who, if there was a victim, anything about victim here, there was an injustice here. There was an injustice. You remember the controversies of Bible translation throughout history. William Tyndale, for example, trying to get the Bible to the common people, commoners, such as I am koine, I am a commoner. Well, the effort was upsetting these people. Now there's injustice here, so it was an unjust condition. But you notice it's not about corporate or individual, it's about categories of people. These that had not been primed, they were unprimed, they had not been indoctrinated, led away into the things, as Revelation, the deep things of Satan, so to speak. I've always admired people that things are really always abstract, always deep, so convoluted. It might be intentionally designed that way by the sophist, but God is the one preventing these people from knowing, and he's the one that is the reason these people do. So now we have, let's just mark this off, for example. So you have two things going on, and God is doing both. God is doing both. These people were merchandising men. They were commercializing Christ. They were preferring their tradition of the elders over the commandments of God. They were exploiting people, placing daughters of Abraham into human trafficking. They were taking sons of Abraham and using them as tax collectors who were extorting their own people. And they were teaching people to constantly spiral downwardly into a diminished return on anything they did. So they were contradicting the economy of God. So there's plenty here of their crimes that are tells that they don't have anything in them that was revealed by God. And you remember Paul, who's quite an example, in Galatians 2:16, he said, while knowing, and it's the word oida, and that word is idea in our English, it's video in Latin, and it's a sight word, notice, and I will tell you, awareness. There. And Paul said, by knowing, it's a causal participle there, instrumentally involved in what catalyzed the finite, deliberate causal action to believe. He said, by knowing, by getting it, by being aware that no kind of man is being justified out from any kind of law, even we, by getting that, believe, trusted into Jesus Christ in order that we might be declared right, just out from his faithfulness. And the faithfulness of Jesus Christ is the righteousness of God displayed, achieved, accomplished. I don't know how much more to say. The righteousness of God cannot even be understood apart from the faithfulness of Jesus Christ. So that's powerful, especially with Saul of Tarsus having once been this. But now he was an example that was made of him to show how gracious God is and efficacious is his work to go take someone who was the leader of the enemy, if you will, the Judaizers who took people and stoned. They were skull crushers. They take women away from their families. They would capture women in even staged, propped up crime scenes as the one where they wanted to place Jesus in contradiction to Moses, and they broke in and interrupted his teaching class to try him out. And they tried to place him in contradiction to Abraham and accused him of blasphemy when he said before Abraham was, he was already. And then they wanted to place him in contradiction with Caesar. So these guys are the players. Here was the top of the rung in that hierarchy of exploitation of men, the merchandising of men, the commercializing of Christ. And here's another word, gnosko. That's knowledge. The noun is gnosis. Gnosis, knowledge, gnosko. And then we have the apocalypto, the oida, the gnosko. And all of this is according to his correct opinion. So that really it's quite satisfactory that all of this is what takes place prior to regeneration. And unless God were to intervene here as severe as he did for Saul, there's nothing here that can break that. We have the power of the gospel when we preach Jesus. That's the inbreaking. Again, it's all according to the correct opinion of God. That troubles people. I don't know why. I can't imagine people saying they trust, serve, and love the living God and yet question his correct opinion. But again, all of this is what takes place prior to regeneration. 1 Corinthians 4:15 says we're fathered through the gospel. Running out of room. But to say all of this in a word is that, for example, people who are alarmed by the assertion regeneration precedes faith, and then on the other hand, people arm themselves to defend regeneration precedes faith. Bible knowledge doesn't find that assertion necessary. We have a lot of words. We have a controller, the Lord who lords, the King who reigns, the ruler who rules, the master who masters. We have the King of all the kings calling his Father the Lord of heaven and earth, the controller. We have a correct opinion. We have people that are considered infantile, because if you ever notice how people treat you, those of you that are studying the Bible, unless they're someone who's a follower of Christ and they want to know and understand, unless this has happened, they're probably over here with a guarded interest that will cost you your life if you weren't in a nation, for example, like ours, an inalienable right to peaceably assemble. And we've had people infringe upon that, wanting to exasperate our efforts to study because for some reason they held some interest in merchandising men, proselyting men, having people approach toward them. But now that's all a tell when it comes to how do you respond to people examining the Bible, learning it, and comparing that to confessions, creeds, or doctrinal statements, or traditions of men. And that's basically the best reply. So those of you that are working in the Koine Project class, those of you that are carrying your keyword study Bibles to class, and those of you that are laboring at home, working, using blueletterbible.org and other tools like that. Net Bible is really great. So for studying and research. So you have a blessed day. And again, I'm not sure how to take seriously people's, I guess they have the interest in tamping down our research and our study, but they don't have any power to do so. And since he's the Lord of heaven and earth, the controller, we can all rest assured that even though there's fallible forensics such as in Calvinism, and there's completely off the grid assertions in Arminianism, and then whatever else is constantly emerging out there, we have enough here that, so that's why I can't take personally. I don't know what it'd be like to be anti-Calvinist. I don't know what it'd be like to go out and become an anti-sentiment toward others doesn't ingratiate nor cause a person to acquire knowledge, and it doesn't demonstrate a growth in grace and knowledge. But then if you grow in grace and knowledge, you'd have something more to say than just speak against another. So those of you, I'm honored to help people study and to facilitate learning, and you just continue to study. Have a blessed day.